The crisp air of an Ohio autumn settled over the Dawson household as twilight descended on the quiet suburb of Columbus. Olivia Dawson pulled her scrubs tighter around her shoulders as she stepped out of her car, exhaustion clinging to her after another grueling hospital shift. The porch light glowed faintly against the darkening sky, guiding her up the steps where a small stack of mail waited. She scooped it up with one hand, her bag slipping from her shoulder with the other, and immediately noticed a thick envelope edged in gold. It looked out of place among the bills and grocery flyers, and her chest tightened before she even slid it open. Inside, the card gleamed with embossed lettering. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Emily Dawson and Robert Carter." Olivia froze, staring at the names. Emily, her younger sister, and Robert Carter, the real estate mogul who had become a fixture in Columbus business circles. He was wealthy, ambitious, a man everyone seemed to admire. "Mom!" The shout broke her stillness. Daniel, her 7-year-old, came barreling out of the hallway, clutching a crayon drawing of a dinosaur. His face was lit up with pride. "Look what I made today. My teacher said it's my best yet." Olivia bent down, brushing his soft hair back as she smiled at the excitement in his eyes. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. We'll hang it on the fridge," she said, her voice warm, though her mind was still tangled around the invitation. In the kitchen, Sophie, 10 years old and already carrying herself with the poise of someone older, sat hunched over her math homework. "Hi, Mom," she murmured, pencil scratching across the page. From the living room, her husband, Mark Dawson, loosened his tie and set down his briefcase. He glanced at the envelope in Olivia's hand. "Something interesting in the mail?" His tone was casual, but she noticed the way his eyes flicked curiously toward the gilded card. Olivia slid the invitation across the counter. "Emily's getting married. To Robert Carter." Mark let out a low whistle. "The Robert Carter? He's a big name around here. Impressive." He reached for the coffee maker, as if the news were nothing more than a conversation piece. Olivia nodded faintly, but her thoughts drifted far deeper. Her sister Emily had always been the bright one, the girl who could walk into any room and capture everyone's attention with her easy smile and quick wit. Olivia, older by 5 years, had been the serious one, the dependable daughter who stayed home to help, the one who became a nurse because stability mattered more than spotlight. Their parents had praised Emily often, urging Olivia to learn from her younger sister's spark. It was an old wound, one Olivia thought she had long outgrown. Yet the sharp edge of it resurfaced as she stared at the shimmering wedding invitation. Emily's life had unfolded like a polished storybook. A law degree with honors, a prestigious job at a downtown firm, and now marriage to a wealthy, respected businessman. Olivia exhaled slowly, her chest tightening. She turned toward the window, watching Daniel chase Sophie down the hall with his dinosaur drawing. Their laughter filled the house, grounding her. She had her own life, Mark, the children, the modest but comfortable home they had built in this suburb. A steady marriage, a steady career, and 2 children who gave her world meaning. That should have been enough. And yet, as the gold lettering glimmered in her hand, Olivia couldn't shake the weight pressing against her chest. She was happy for Emily, at least that was what she told herself. But beneath that polite joy lingered something harder, something she didn't want to name. It was envy, quiet and aching. The weeks that followed blurred into a rhythm of errands and late-night calls. Olivia found herself drawn into the orbit of her sister's wedding, juggling her own shifts at the hospital with endless details Emily insisted she weigh in on. Should we go with white roses or hydrangeas for the reception? Emily's voice bubbled with excitement over the phone. "Robert says roses, but I think hydrangeas feel fresher. What do you think, Liv?" Olivia tucked the receiver between her ear and shoulder, stirring a pot of pasta for her kids. "Hydrangeas," she answered, keeping her tone even. "They'll hold up better through the night." "Perfect. I knew you'd have good instincts." Emily replied, satisfied, before launching into talk about the menu, the guest list, the seating chart. Every call carried the same rush of energy, Emily's laughter spilling through the line, her joy undeniable. Olivia listened, answered when asked, but hung up each time with a lingering heaviness in her chest. At first, the preparations were almost comforting. Choosing floral arrangements, tasting cakes, double-checking the decor for the ballroom. It was the sort of practical work Olivia had always excelled at. But with every meeting, every errand, she felt the contrast between her life and her sister's sharpen like a blade. At home, the children noticed her distraction. One evening, as she gathered her notes on the florist's order, Daniel sat at the kitchen table, coloring quietly. His head lifted suddenly, his young brow furrowed. "Mom," he said softly, "I don't like Uncle Robert." Olivia paused, surprised. "Why would you say that?" Daniel fiddled with his crayon. "He hides his phone when I'm around. Every time. Like he doesn't want me to see what he's doing." His voice was matter-of-fact, not the tone of a child spinning stories. Olivia forced a chuckle, brushing it off. "Sweetheart, Robert's just busy. Grown-ups have work calls, that's all. Don't worry about it." But Daniel only frowned, unconvinced, before returning to his drawing. Olivia turned back to her notes, though her hands felt unsteady. Meanwhile, Mark had grown distant in ways she struggled to explain. He had always worked long hours at the construction firm, but lately his absences stretched later into the night. His explanations came quickly, rehearsed. Project deadlines, client meetings, unexpected site problems. When he was home, his phone never left his side. More than once, Olivia walked into the living room to find him lowering his voice, turning away as he ended a call. "Just work," he'd mutter, slipping the phone into his pocket. She would nod, pretending to accept it, but the avoidance lingered in her mind like a splinter. At dinner, she noticed the way he avoided her gaze. The children chattered about school, Sophie excitedly describing a science project, Daniel showing off another drawing. Mark smiled, asked a question here and there, but his eyes often drifted elsewhere, as though some invisible tether was pulling him away from the table. Olivia told herself not to jump to conclusions. Marriage had its ebbs and flows. People got busy, stressed, distracted. Still, the unease built with each passing day. Late at night, lying awake in the quiet of their bedroom, she studied his silhouette beside her. Mark would turn onto his side, phone still on the nightstand, its screen lighting up briefly before he silenced it. She wanted to ask, demand even, but the words caught in her throat. Trust, she reminded herself. Trust was the foundation of everything they had built together. 15 years of marriage, 2 children, a home in this neighborhood. She could not let small doubts unravel all of it. And yet, as she turned her face toward the darkened ceiling, the echo of Daniel's words returned unbidden. "He hides his phone when I'm around." Olivia closed her eyes, steadying her breath, trying to will the unease away. But deep inside, something fragile had already begun to crack. The rehearsal dinner unfolded in a warm, bustling glow inside the hotel ballroom. Strings of light draped across the ceiling, the clink of glasses blending with bursts of laughter from both families. Emily shone in the center of it all, her smile radiant as she moved from guest to guest, hand in hand with Robert, whose presence carried an air of quiet authority. Olivia sat at one of the long tables with Daniel and Sophie beside her, their plates full of food they had only half touched. Across the room, she could see her parents laughing at something Robert had said, their pride in Emily practically spilling over. Olivia straightened in her chair, reminding herself that this evening was about celebration, not comparison. Mark leaned close, his tie loosened, his hand brushing her arm briefly. "I need to step out for a bit," he said lightly. Olivia frowned. "Step out? It's the rehearsal dinner. What could be so important?" "Work," he replied, already reaching for his phone. "One of the projects got complicated." Won't take long. His tone was practiced, calm, almost dismissive. Before she could press him further, he kissed her cheek quickly and slipped away into the crowd. She watched him weave through the guests until he disappeared beyond the ballroom doors. Her chest tightened with something sharp and uneasy. Around her, laughter carried on, oblivious to the weight pressing down on her. Daniel sat quietly beside her, poking at the meatballs on his plate. His small face was more serious than usual, his brow furrowed as if something heavy lingered on his mind. Finally, he tugged at her sleeve. "Mom," he whispered, "is Uncle Robert a good man?" Olivia turned to him, startled. "Of course he is," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "Why would you ask that?" Daniel shrugged, his eyes downcast. I'm not sure. Something feels off." His words were tentative, but carried a conviction too steady for a child his age. Olivia reached to smooth his hair, her hand trembling slightly. "Don't worry about things like that, sweetheart. Grown-up stuff isn't for you to carry." She wanted to reassure him, to wave away the worry that had been steadily gnawing at her own heart. But the look in Daniel's eyes lingered, heavy and unsettling, long after he returned to his food. When the dinner ended, and the families parted ways with hugs and promises of tomorrow, Olivia gathered the children and made her way back to the hotel suite reserved for them. Sophie fell asleep quickly, curled under the covers with her tablet slipping from her hand. Daniel, though, stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, restless in the unfamiliar room. "Try to sleep, sweetheart," Olivia whispered, tucking the blanket around him. "When's Dad coming back?" he asked softly. "Soon," she said, though she had no idea if it was true. Hours later, the door finally opened. Mark slipped inside, loosening his tie, his face shadowed with fatigue. "Sorry," he murmured, avoiding her eyes. Things took longer than expected. Olivia studied him in the dim light of the room, her voice low. "What things?" "Work," he repeated almost too quickly. "Just work." He moved toward the bathroom, brushing past her as though the conversation were already over. She stood there, motionless, the distance between them suddenly wider than the space of the room. For years she had told herself that stability was what mattered, that their marriage, their family, their home, all of it was built on trust and endurance. But in that moment, watching his back retreat into the shadows, she felt the fracture widening, undeniable and cold. In the silence that followed, Olivia lay awake beside her husband, his steady breathing betraying nothing, her gaze fixed on the ceiling, the sound of her children sleeping faint in the background. The night before her sister's wedding should have been full of joy and anticipation. Instead, it was heavy with doubt, and the quiet realization that her marriage no longer felt like the safe place it once had been. The grand ballroom of the Columbus Hotel gleamed under chandeliers, every table draped in white linens, every centerpiece a careful arrangement of hydrangeas and roses. The hum of conversation filled the air, soft music weaving through the clatter of glasses and footsteps on polished marble. It was a day that seemed pulled straight from a magazine, a picture-perfect celebration of love. Emily was radiant, a vision in lace and silk, as she stood beside Robert at the altar. Her smile seemed to light the room, her eyes sparkling with the kind of joy that left no doubt she believed her life was falling seamlessly into place. Robert stood tall, steady, the portrait of a man proud of the future waiting for him. The vows were spoken, rings exchanged, and the applause that followed thundered like a wave. From her place as a bridesmaid, Olivia tried to mirror the happiness swirling around her. She smiled, clapped, even wiped at her eyes when Emily walked down the aisle, though the tears were more from pressure than pure emotion. She wanted to be present, to let her sister have her perfect day without a shadow crossing it. But no matter how hard she tried, something gnawed at her from beneath the surface. Her eyes caught Mark's across the room. He was seated a few rows back during the ceremony, his posture casual. But when Emily's gaze flickered toward him, Olivia noticed it. A spark fleeting yet unmistakable. A look that lingered half a beat too long. A subtle curve of his lips, as though sharing a secret no one else could see. Olivia's stomach tightened. She blinked hard, telling herself it was her imagination. Weddings were emotional, after all. People smiled, people cried. But as the ceremony shifted to the reception, her unease only deepened. At the banquet hall, laughter and toasts flowed freely. Sophie played near the dessert table with cousins, but Daniel stayed unusually quiet, his small hands wrapped around her phone. He lifted it only when he thought no one was watching, the glow of the screen lighting his serious young face. Olivia leaned down. "Daniel, what are you doing?" she whispered. He looked up quickly, guilt flashing in his eyes. "Nothing, Mom. Just watching." He lowered the phone, but not before Olivia noticed the red record light flickering at the corner of the screen. She wanted to press him, but the moment was swept away by another cheer as Emily and Robert entered the room. Guests rose, clapping, glasses lifted high. Olivia forced herself to join, though her pulse thudded uncomfortably in her ears. As the evening unfolded, she drifted through conversations, accepting polite compliments on her dress, nodding along to jokes she barely heard. Yet her gaze returned again and again to Mark and Emily. The way his eyes seemed to track her sister's movements, the way Emily's laughter softened when it was directed at him. Small things, subtle things, but to Olivia, they blazed like fire in the shadows. Later, slipping away from the table to clear her head, Olivia wandered into the quieter hallway outside the ballroom. The murmur of voices floated from around the corner. She slowed, her breath catching as she recognized them. Mark's voice, low and intimate. Emily's answering in a whisper. Olivia edged closer, careful not to make a sound. When she turned the corner, the sight hit her like a blow. Mark was standing close, his hand brushing against Emily's, his body angled toward hers with a familiarity that spoke volumes. Emily looked up at him, her face soft, her expression one Olivia had seen only in moments of closeness between lovers. Olivia froze. The walls seemed to tilt around her, the music from the ballroom muffled and far away. For a heartbeat, she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, the truth standing raw before her eyes. Mark shifted slightly, pulling his hand back as if aware of the risk of being caught. Emily glanced around, smoothing her dress, her face composed once more. They separated quickly, each heading in a different direction. Olivia pressed her palm against the cool wall, forcing air into her lungs. She wanted to scream, to confront them both right then and there. But the sound of laughter swelled from the ballroom, the wedding toasts continuing without pause. This was Emily's day, and for now, Olivia swallowed the storm inside her, choosing silence over destruction, at least for the moment. The reception was in full swing, laughter spilling across the ballroom as glasses clinked and music filled the air. Guests raised toasts to Emily and Robert, their voices blending into a chorus of celebration. Olivia sat stiffly at her table, her smile practiced, her eyes scanning the room more than once, always catching sight of Mark or Emily in the crowd. Daniel had grown unusually quiet beside her. His small hands fidgeted in his lap, his face tight with something far older than his years. Suddenly, he leaned closer, tugging at her sleeve with an urgency that made her chest tighten. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the noise, "we have to leave. Right now." Olivia's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about, sweetheart? We can't just walk out." Daniel shook his head, his eyes wide and glistening. He thrust her phone into her hand. "Look." Olivia glanced down, confusion cutting through her fatigue. Then her blood ran cold. On the screen were photographs. Mark and Emily. Not from tonight, but from days, weeks, months past. Her husband with his arm around her sister. Their faces close, their bodies leaning into each other in ways that left nothing to interpretation. In one, they were seated in a car, Mark's hand against Emily's knee. In another, they embraced in a dimly lit hallway. Her throat constricted, She scrolled, her fingers trembling, until the pictures gave way to words, messages, each one more damning than the last. Meet me tonight. I told Robert the first had a meeting. Can't wait to see you. Another. You're the only one who understands me. Her chest tightened, so hard she thought she might faint. Daniel's voice wavered as he spoke, tears spilling down his cheeks. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to snoop. Dad left his tablet open once and I saw messages. So I checked his phone. I knew he was hiding something. I had to know. I had to show you. Olivia's vision blurred. She pulled her son into her arms, holding him against her, her heart breaking not only for herself, but for the innocence stripped from him too soon. Shoot, baby, she whispered, pressing a kiss to his hair. You did nothing wrong. You were brave. You helped me see the truth. He sniffled, clutching her tightly. I didn't want you to be hurt, but I couldn't pretend anymore. Olivia's pulse thundered in her ears, a sickening mix of fury and devastation. 15 years of marriage, 2 children, every late night, every excuse, every small moment of doubt. Suddenly, it all fell into place with brutal clarity. Her sister, her husband, betrayal layered upon betrayal, ripping away the foundations of her life in a single instant. Around her, guests laughed, oblivious to the earthquake beneath her skin. Emily, glowing in her gown, posed for pictures, Robert beaming beside her. Mark mingled freely, his smile easy, his lies woven seamlessly into the night. Olivia straightened slowly, still clutching Daniel's small hand in hers. Her body trembled, but her mind had already begun to crystallize with a single thought. She could not let this secret rot inside her. Robert deserved to know. She met Daniel's tearful eyes and nodded, her voice steady despite the storm raging within her. Thank you for trusting me, sweetheart. You were right to show me, and now it's my turn to do the right thing. Daniel's lips quivered. What are you going to do, Mom? Olivia looked across the ballroom, her gaze landing on Robert Carter, the man celebrating what he thought was the happiest day of his life. Her grip on Daniel's hand tightened. I'm going to tell him the truth, she said quietly. And in that moment, Olivia Dawson knew there was no turning back. The ballroom pulsed with music and laughter, but Olivia's world had gone eerily quiet. Her grip on Daniel's hand was firm as she guided him through the crowd, weaving between tables until the cool night air of the hotel garden embraced them. Fairy lights twinkled in the hedges, their glow soft against the darkness. Robert stood near a fountain, speaking with a pair of business associates. He noticed Olivia's pale face immediately, excused himself, and walked toward her with a frown. Olivia, is something wrong? He asked, concern flickering in his eyes. She nodded faintly, her throat dry. We need to talk. Privately. Robert's gaze shifted to Daniel, who clung to her side, his small fingers still wrapped tightly around her own. Olivia drew in a steadying breath, then held out the phone. You deserve to see this. Robert hesitated, confusion shadowing his features, then took the phone. As he scrolled through the images, his expression changed, confusion giving way to realization, then to raw pain. The photos, the messages, the undeniable proof of betrayal stared back at him. His jaw clenched, his shoulders stiffened, but it was his eyes that revealed the devastation. How long? He rasped, his voice breaking. Olivia shook her head. I don't know. Long enough. Robert's hand trembled as he continued to scroll, reading words not meant for his eyes, plans made in secrecy, lies woven into their lives. He closed the phone slowly, as though it carried a weight too heavy to hold. His breath shuddered. I suspected. She was always deleting messages, always making excuses. But I didn't want to believe it. Not until now. Daniel's small voice cut into the silence. I'm sorry, Mr. Carter. I didn't mean to find it, but I thought you should know. Robert looked down at him, his expression softening for just a moment. He bent slightly, resting a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're braver than most adults, Daniel. Thank you for telling the truth." Before Olivia could respond, footsteps approached. Emily appeared first, her gown sweeping across the stone path, her eyes narrowing at the sight of them together. Mark was only a step behind her, his face tightening when he saw Robert holding the phone. "What's going on out here?" Emily demanded, her voice unsteady. Robert's voice was cold as steel. He held up the phone, the damning evidence illuminated in the glow of the garden lights. "The truth has a way of finding its way out, even tonight." Emily's face drained of color. "Robert, wait, it's not what you think." Mark stepped forward quickly, his voice rushed. "She's right. This isn't what it looks like. You've got it wrong." "Enough." Olivia's voice cut through, sharper than she'd ever heard it before. Her body trembled, but her words carried a clarity that left no room for denial. "Don't you dare stand there and lie. 15 years, Mark. 15 years of marriage, 2 children, and this is what you've done. With my sister." Emily's lips quivered, and for the first time that night, tears welled in her eyes. I never meant for it to go this far. I was always in your shadow, Olivia. Mom and Dad were proud of you. You had the family, the home, everything I wanted. And Mark, he understood me. He saw me." Olivia let out a bitter laugh, hollow and sharp. "So you took what wasn't yours? That's not love, Emily. That's betrayal." Robert's face hardened, his voice carrying the weight of finality. "This wedding is over. I won't build a life on lies. Not with you." He let the phone drop back into Olivia's hand as if it burned him. Emily gasped, reaching for him. "Please, Robert, listen." But he turned away, his posture rigid, his heart closed. Mark's eyes darted to Olivia. "We can fix this, Liv. For the kids, for everything we've built." Her response came without hesitation. "There is nothing left to fix. Our marriage is over. For the children's sake, leave quietly and never ask me to look at you the same way again." Daniel clutched her hand tighter, his eyes glistening as he looked up at his mother. Olivia straightened, her grip firm, her resolve unshaken. Without another word, she turned, guiding Daniel back toward the hotel. Behind them, the garden erupted in chaos. Emily sobbing, Robert speaking in clipped tones, Mark's voice rising in desperation. But Olivia didn't look back. The music from the ballroom drifted faintly into the night, a cruel echo of the celebration that had just collapsed. Olivia walked on, her son at her side, leaving behind the wreckage of deceit and stepping into the uncertain future with only one certainty. She would not stay silent anymore. 6 months later, the rhythm of Olivia Dawson's life had changed entirely. The divorce papers were signed, the court dates behind her, and the echoes of that disastrous wedding night had faded into memory. What remained was quieter, smaller, but hers. The modest house she had rented sat on a quiet street outside Columbus, its siding plain, its yard in need of care. To Olivia, it felt like freedom. On moving day, Daniel and Sophie had raced through the empty rooms, their voices bouncing off the bare walls. Daniel chose the smaller bedroom at the back, insisting it was his fortress. Sophie claimed the one with the bigger window, already planning where her desk would go. Olivia stood in the doorway of her own room, boxes stacked at her feet, and let herself breathe. The house wasn't perfect, but it was safe, and safety was enough. Her new job as a family counselor had come almost by accident. She had stumbled upon the posting at a community center while searching for part-time work, unsure what she was capable of beyond nursing. In the interview, she spoke openly about her own journey, about betrayal, resilience, and the fight to rebuild stability for her children. To her surprise, the director leaned forward and said, "That's exactly why we need you. You understand what people are going through. You can help them heal." Now, Olivia spent her mornings meeting with clients, parents struggling through separation, children caught in the crossfire of conflict, women learning to stand on their own again. She listened, offered guidance, and drew from the deepest parts of her own pain to show them there was a way forward. For the first time in years, her work didn't just pay the bills, it gave her life a sense of purpose. At home, Daniel and Sophie slowly adjusted to their new normal. At first, there had been questions. Why doesn't Dad live with us? Why do we see him only every other weekend? But Olivia answered gently, never speaking ill of Mark, never placing the burden on their small shoulders. Over time, the questions quieted, replaced by laughter, homework sessions at the kitchen table, and movie nights curled on the couch. Daniel grew calmer, the anxious edge that once shadowed him fading as the months passed. He planted an apple sapling in the backyard, proudly announcing it would grow as they grew, a symbol of their fresh start. Sophie thrived at school, her drawings covering the refrigerator, her bright voice filling the house each morning before the bus arrived. For Olivia, the hardest moments came at night when the house was still. She would sit by the window, the hum of the neighborhood fading into silence, and trace the band on her finger where a ring used to rest. 15 years of her life had unraveled, and sometimes the weight of that loss threatened to crush her. But then she would think of her children sleeping safely in their rooms, their breaths steady and peaceful, and she knew she had made the only choice possible. Being a single mother was not easy. There were bills to stretch, meals to plan, schedules to balance. But each day Olivia discovered strength she hadn't known she possessed. She found herself laughing again, her shoulders lighter, her voice steadier. The shadow of betrayal no longer defined her. Instead, it became the fuel that pushed her forward. On a late afternoon in early spring, Olivia sat on the porch steps with a mug of tea, watching Daniel chase Sophie across the yard. Their laughter rose into the air, clear and unburdened. She felt the corners of her lips lift into a smile. Small, but genuine. The life she had now was not the one she had imagined years ago, but it was real. It was hers. And slowly, piece by piece, Olivia Dawson was coming back to herself. The first snow of December dusted the neighborhood in white. The streets hushed beneath a blanket of quiet. Olivia's house glowed softly from within, the living room warm with the scent of pine and cinnamon. Daniel and Sophie had dragged a tree through the front door earlier that week, laughing as they tried to balance it upright while Olivia steadied the base. Now, boxes of ornaments sat open on the carpet, ready to be unpacked. There was a knock at the door. Olivia brushed her hands against her sweater and opened it to find Robert standing there, a potted poinsettia cradled in his arms. "Housewarming gift," he said with a small smile. "Or maybe holiday cheer. Either way, I thought you could use it." Olivia stepped aside, touched by the gesture. "Come in. The kids will be glad to see you." Robert set the plant on the coffee table, his eyes taking in the glow of the tree lights. The children sprawled on the floor, stringing garlands. Daniel jumped up to greet him, Sophie close behind. They peppered him with questions about the poinsettia, about his dog, about whether he would stay for hot cocoa. Olivia watched them with quiet gratitude. What had started as an awkward visit months ago had grown into something steady. Robert had been broken too, humiliated and blindsided on the very day meant to be his new beginning. But instead of turning bitter, he had chosen to move forward. Over time, that resilience had mirrored her own, and between them, an easy friendship had formed. Not romance, not yet, maybe not ever, but companionship rooted in shared pain and the understanding that healing takes time. Through him, Olivia had been reminded that her story did not end with betrayal. It was still unfolding, and she had a hand in shaping every page. News of Mark and Emily reached her in fragments, through mutual acquaintances, through whispers that trickled across town. The marriage between them, if it could even be called that, had unraveled quickly. They had splintered under the very weight of the lies that had bound them together. Emily left Columbus not long after, chasing another job in another city. Mark was seen with a different woman on his arm, the details irrelevant, the pattern predictable. Olivia didn't ask for updates. She didn't care. The man who had once been her husband, the sister who had once been her confidant, they no longer held power over her. They were not chapters she wished to reopen. Still, one evening near the end of the year, the past arrived at her doorstep. It was New Year's Eve, the house alive with the crackle of laughter as Daniel and Sophie hung the last ornaments. A knock echoed against the winter night, and when Olivia opened the door, Emily stood there. Her sister looked thinner, her once bright eyes dimmed with fatigue. "Olivia," Emily said softly, her voice trembling. "I know I don't deserve this, but I came to ask for forgiveness." For a moment, silence stretched between them, the only sound the muffled laughter of children inside and the faint whistle of the wind. Olivia studied her sister's face, the woman who had wounded her more deeply than anyone else could. She felt no rush of anger, no flood of sorrow, only a cool, settled calm. "I don't hate you," Olivia said at last, her voice steady, "but you are no longer part of my life." Emily's lips parted, her eyes filling with tears. She nodded once, as though she had expected nothing less, and stepped back into the snow. Olivia closed the door gently, her heart neither lighter nor heavier, only free. Inside, Daniel was looping tinsel around Sophie, both of them laughing so hard they tumbled onto the rug. Olivia joined them by the tree, adjusting an ornament, her fingers brushing the rough bark of the trunk. The lights flickered across their faces, filling the room with a glow that felt almost sacred. For the first time in a long time, Olivia's smile came easily, not because anyone had returned, not because the past had been mended, but because she had chosen to move forward. She had chosen healing, chosen her children, chosen herself. Outside, fireworks cracked faintly in the distance, welcoming the new year. Inside, Olivia Dawson stood in the light of her own making, knowing that some wounds did not need forgiveness to close. Sometimes the greatest strength was found in letting go and building a life from the ruins. Not every wound requires forgiveness to heal. Sometimes the truest strength lies in letting go, in choosing to heal, and in rebuilding a life from the wreckage.
The world keeps turning, and with each turn comes a new story. When one door closes, another opens, leading us into a journey entirely different. Let us set aside the echoes of the tale just past and step together into a new realm where another destiny awaits to be told. And now I invite you to listen to the second story, a path of its own, unrelated to what came before, yet filled with mysteries and surprises meant only for those willing to journey onward with me.
I stood in my car for a long minute, staring at the porch light that glowed faintly through the trees. My hands tightened on the steering, even though the engine had been off for 5 minutes. Nathan had texted me an hour ago, "Mom's here. She'll only stay a couple of days." A couple of days, it felt like a lifetime. Joanne had a way of making every room colder the moment she stepped into it. For 5 years, I had tried to be patient, to keep the peace, to be the good daughter-in-law who smiled even when insulted. But tonight, I felt my chest tighten at the thought of her voice echoing through my home. I could already hear the subtle digs, the sharp looks, the way she scanned Caleb as if searching for proof he wasn't Nathan's son. I hated that look most of all. Nathan always told me to let it go. "She's just set in her ways, Madison. She doesn't mean half of what she says." Maybe he was right, but what about the other half? The half where she once suggested we do a DNA test just to be sure. The half where she whispered to neighbors that Caleb's dark hair and sharp blue eyes didn't come from Nathan's side of the family. She never said it to my face, but she didn't have to. I could hear her loud and clear. I took a deep breath, gripping my bag. I didn't want Caleb to see me tense up before I even stepped inside. He loved his grandmother, even if she rarely showed him kindness. He was only 5. He shouldn't have to carry the weight of adult grudges. I whispered to myself, "It's just 2 days. You can handle 2 days." Walking up the path, I remembered the first time I had met Joanne. She had barely shaken my hand. her eyes sliding immediately to the toddler clinging to my leg. "And this is," she'd asked, her tone clipped, as if Caleb were some stranger's child I had dragged in off the street. That moment had set the tone for every meeting afterward. Inside, I could hear voices, Nathan's warm baritone and Joanne's sharp, cutting replies. I paused at the door, suddenly tempted to turn around, to drive somewhere, anywhere but home. That wasn't me, though. I had fought too hard to build a life for Caleb and me to run from a woman who thrived on intimidation. My hand lingered on the doorknob, cold against my palm. I thought of Caleb's drawings taped proudly to the fridge, of the little wooden truck Nathan had built with him last weekend, of the life we had been piecing together with patience and love. I wouldn't let anyone, not even Joanne, make me feel like an outsider in my own home. I stepped inside. The smell of roasted chicken and Joanne's perfume, a heavy floral scent that somehow always smelled like disapproval, hit me at once. Nathan glanced up from the kitchen table, smiling, relief flashing across his face. Joanne barely looked at me, her lips pressing into that familiar thin line. "Madison," she said flatly, as if my name were something bitter on her tongue. I forced a smile and hung up my coat. Tonight would be long, and I had no idea just how long. There's a moment, right before sleep, when memories creep in uninvited. They don't ask if you want them. They just flood your mind, sharp and vivid. That night, as Joanne's cold stare still lingered in my head, the past came rushing back. I hadn't always lived in Eugene. Years ago, I was a girl with big plans and no interest in romance. My parents' marriage had taught me early what chaos love could bring. My father's drinking, the late-night arguments, the slamming doors, all of it left a scar. I focused on school, on building a life that would never rely on anyone else. 2 degrees by 24, a stable job with an international firm, and dreams of working abroad. That was my plan until I met him. Blake Reed, tall, charming, with the kind of confidence that filled a room. He wasn't just attractive, he was attentive, the way men in books are, listening as if every word I said mattered. We met at a small coffee shop downtown, where I sat buried in contracts, and he struck up a conversation about the book I was reading. By the end of the night, I was laughing more than I had in years. For months, he courted me like something out of an old movie. Dinners, flowers, late-night phone calls that stretched into dawn. He never let me pay for a thing, and I, blinded by the warmth he brought into my lonely little apartment, didn't question why we never celebrated holidays together, why he never introduced me to his family, why he seemed to vanish every weekend. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought it was a miracle, something good, something permanent. I told him one chilly November evening, my hands trembling as I held the little gift box with the positive test inside. I had imagined tears of joy, a hug, maybe even a proposal. Instead, he went pale. His smile cracked like thin ice. "You can't have this baby," he said flatly, pushing the box back into my hands. "You don't understand. This can't happen." I didn't understand. I'd beg him to explain. That's when he admitted it. He was married. Had been for years. A wife named Chloe. A life that didn't include me. I remember standing there in shock, my ears ringing. He offered me money, as if that would fix it. As if Caleb, still just a whisper of life inside me, was some mistake to be erased. I walked away that night and never looked back. At least I thought I hadn't. I kept the baby, even when my own father sneered and neighbors whispered. I promised myself I would never speak Blake's name again. Never let that shame define me. Then Nathan came into my life. Gentle, steady Nathan, who fixed cars by day and played guitar to calm Caleb at night. He didn't care about my past. He loved Caleb from day one, holding him as if he'd always been his. For the first time, I felt safe, like I'd built something no one could touch. But secrets have a way of resurfacing, and Joanne's voice tonight, so sharp, so certain about Caleb's bloodline, made me wonder if maybe she'd always known. And if she knew, who else did? I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft hum of Nathan's breathing. My heart pounded with an old, familiar fear, the kind I thought I'd buried with my past. I closed my eyes, whispering to myself, "No one will take my child from me. Not now, not ever." The months after Blake walked out of my life were some of the hardest I had ever known. I moved back into my father's house because I couldn't afford rent on my own. He had been a mean drunk for as long as I could remember, and pregnancy didn't soften him one bit. If anything, it gave him fresh ammunition. Another mouth to feed, huh? Couldn't keep your legs closed. His words were sharp and deliberate, meant to cut deep, and they did. I worked from home, doing translation jobs, and any contract work I could find, but money was always tight. The neighbors whispered every time I stepped outside, their judgment heavy on my shoulders. I learned to keep my head down, to focus on the baby growing inside me, and nothing else. When Caleb was born on a snowy New Year's Eve, I promised him he would never feel unwanted, not even for a second. He was mine, my miracle. For a while, it was just the two of us against the world. I nursed him while reading through legal documents at midnight, rocked him to sleep before sending emails to clients, and smiled through exhaustion because giving up wasn't an option. But even the strongest walls crack under pressure, and mine did the day my father threw a beer bottle against the kitchen wall, inches from where I held Caleb. That night, I packed our things and left. Finding a place wasn't easy, but life has a strange way of opening doors when you're desperate enough to walk through them. I met Nathan a few weeks later at a community auto shop. My car's transmission had given out, and I barely had the money for repairs. Nathan had grease on his hands, a kind smile, and eyes that didn't judge. He knelt next to Caleb's car seat, made a silly face, and for the first time in days, my son laughed. We talked while he worked, nothing serious at first, just about cars, the weather, how expensive diapers were. But something about him felt steady. He didn't flirt, didn't try to impress me with big gestures. He just showed up. Every time I needed something, advice about my car, help carrying groceries, or even just someone to talk to, Nathan was there. Slowly, a friendship formed, then something warmer. When he first asked me out, I hesitated. My life was messy, and I wasn't sure anyone would willingly step into it. But Nathan did without hesitation. He accepted Caleb as his own, reading bedtime stories and teaching him how to build little wooden trucks in the garage. There was no judgment in his eyes, only patience. After a year of dating, he proposed on a quiet evening at the park, Caleb perched on his shoulders, clapping like he understood exactly what was happening. We married in the spring and moved into Nathan's small but cozy house near the edge of Eugene. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe, maybe even happy. But happiness can make you forget how fragile life really is. Joanne never liked me. She made that clear at our first family dinner, and she didn't hide her contempt as the years passed. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that people like her eventually came around. I was wrong. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. The way she looked at Caleb, the questions she asked, the subtle digs about his hair and eyes. But I wanted peace so badly, I convinced myself it didn't matter. I had Nathan, I had Caleb, and I had a home. What could possibly go wrong? Life with Nathan was good most days. He was kind, patient, and steady, and he loved Caleb as if he had been there from day one. But Joanne's shadow hung over our marriage like a storm cloud that never moved. She came around only when she wanted something, never for a friendly visit, never just to see her grandchildren without a reason. And when she did show up, she made sure I felt small in my own home. It wasn't just me. Joanne treated Nathan differently too, always with a subtle disappointment, as if her younger son hadn't lived up to what she believed he should be. In her eyes, Blake, the golden child, could do no wrong. Blake had gone off to college, married Chloe, the daughter of an influential businessman, and landed a job managing one of her father's companies. They lived in a big house outside Portland, drove new cars, and vacationed in Europe every summer. Joanne practically worshipped them. At every family gathering, rare as they were, she compared Nathan to his older brother, never missing an opportunity to point out how different their lives were. Blake just bought a new place, 3-car garage and all. And Nathan, how's that little shop of yours doing? Still busy with old trucks. The way she said old trucks always dripped with judgment, as if honest work meant nothing unless it came with a suit and tie. Chloe, though, she was different. Sweet, polite, and almost painfully optimistic. She tried to bridge the gap between Joanne and me, bringing homemade pies to family dinners and asking about Caleb like she genuinely cared. But even her kindness had a thread of sadness running through it. I later learned she and Blake had been trying for a baby for years, with no luck. That struggle, though heartbreaking, only deepened Joanne's obsession with having another grandchild. Her grandchild. I saw the way Joanne's eyes lingered on Caleb whenever she visited. It wasn't the warm look of a proud grandmother. It was calculating, as if she were measuring something, looking for proof of what she had suspected all along, that Caleb didn't belong to Nathan. She never said it directly, but I could feel it in every offhand comment, every glance that lasted a beat too long. One afternoon, during a family barbecue, I overheard her talking to a neighbor. He's a sweet boy, sure, but doesn't he look more like Blake than Nathan? Those eyes, that hair. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? My stomach dropped. She was planting seeds, whispering poison where I couldn't even defend myself. Nathan brushed it off when I told him later. She's just being mom. She doesn't mean anything by it. But deep down, I saw the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. That tiny shadow of doubt was enough to make me furious, not at him, but at her. Joanne thrived on control, on dividing people just enough so she could steer things her way. And lately, she had been visiting more often, her questions sharper, her interest in Caleb deeper. Blake and Chloe had visited once since moving back from Portland. Blake barely acknowledged me, too busy talking to Joanne in hushed tones. Chloe smiled politely but seemed distracted. I thought nothing of it at the time. Why would I? Families talk, siblings catch up. But looking back, I realized there was something else in their conversation, a secret, heavy and deliberate, that I wasn't meant to hear. I brushed it off then, but a nagging feeling lingered. Something was shifting in the family dynamic, something I couldn't quite name yet. I only knew one thing for certain. Joanne had an agenda, and whatever it was, it involved Caleb. That night, I came home later than usual. Caleb was spending the evening at my mom's house, so it was just supposed to be Nathan, Joanne, and me. I sat in the car for a full minute, gathering my strength. Something about the way Joanne had smiled earlier, tight, secretive, made my stomach knot. When I finally stepped inside, I froze. Their voices floated down the hallway from the living room. Low but urgent. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but my name stopped me cold. Madison doesn't deserve that boy, Nathan. You know it as well as I do, Joanne said, her tone sharp and certain. I frowned, my heart thudding. Nathan sighed. Mom, don't start. Caleb is my son. End of story. Your son. Joanne scoffed. Open your eyes. You think I can't see it? He's got Blake's eyes, Blake's hair. I knew the moment I saw him. And I know why she rushed you into marriage. She trapped you with another man's child. My breath caught in my throat. No one knew about Blake. No one. Nathan's voice rose. Enough. Even if that were true, and it's not, it doesn't change how I feel about him. He's my family. But Joanne wasn't done. And what about Blake? He and Chloe can't have children, Nathan. Do you know what that does to them? What it's doing to this family? That boy, your boy, should be with his real father. With Blake and Chloe, he'd have everything: money, opportunity, a stable home. Don't you see? It's the right thing to do. My whole body went numb. She wasn't just talking about Caleb. She was plotting to take him from me. Nathan's voice shook. You've lost your mind. You expect me to just hand over my son because you think you see a resemblance? Because Blake's wife can't get pregnant? That's insane. Not insane. Strategic. Joanne's voice turned cold, calculated. All it takes is proving Madison's unfit. Show she's unstable, too busy with work, neglectful. I already have people who'd be willing to sign statements. And once Blake files for paternity testing, I staggered back a step, clutching the wall to steady myself. The world tilted. She had it all planned. False accusations, court filings, tearing my family apart, all because she worshipped one son and dismissed the other. Nathan's chair scraped loudly. If you do this, if you even think about doing this, we're done, Mom. You hear me? Done. Don't be dramatic. You'll thank me when it's over, she snapped, her words dripping with certainty. In that moment, I realized two things. First, Joanne had never hated me simply for who I was. She hated me because she believed Caleb wasn't Nathan's. And second, my past, the one I had buried so deep, was now a weapon in her hands. I stood frozen in the hallway, shaking. For years, I had carried the secret of Blake's betrayal like a stone in my chest, thinking I'd buried it forever. But Joanne had dug it up and twisted it into something monstrous. I didn't even notice the tears until they hit my lips. I had promised Caleb the day he was born that no one would ever take him from me, and I intended to keep that promise. Wiping my face, I straightened my shoulders. I couldn't stay silent. Not tonight. Not ever again. I don't remember deciding to move. 1 second, I was frozen in the hallway, my back pressed to the wall. The next, my feet carried me into the living room. Joanne sat upright on the couch, arms crossed, her expression sharp as a knife. Nathan stood near the window, his hands clenched at his sides. They both looked up when I walked in. "Madison," Nathan said quietly, surprise flickering across his face. I stared straight at Joanne. "Get out." Her eyebrows shot up, but her tone was smug. "Excuse me." "You heard me. Get out of my house." Nathan stepped toward me. "Mads, no," I said, my voice shaking but clear. I heard every word, every disgusting, hateful thing. "You want to take my son? You think I'm unfit? That Caleb belongs with Blake and Chloe, like he's some prize you can just move around on a board? Not in this lifetime." Joanne's eyes narrowed, her mouth twisting into that familiar look of disdain. "You should be thanking me. That boy deserves a proper life." I cut her off, my anger boiling over. "He has a proper life. He has a father who loves him, a mother who works every day to give him everything she can, and a home where he's safe. The only thing he doesn't need is you." For the first time, Joanne faltered. It was only for a second, but I saw it, the flicker of shock that I dared to stand up to her. Nathan moved to my side, resting a hand on my shoulder. "Mom, you need to leave. Tonight." Her face twisted. "Nathan, don't do this. I am your mother." "And I am Caleb's father," he said firmly. "This is my family. If you can't respect my wife and my son, then you're not welcome here." The silence that followed was thick, broken only by Joanne's sharp intake of breath. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping the hardwood. "You'll regret this," she spat, stepping toward the door. "Both of you. Don't come crawling back when it all falls apart." When she reached the entryway, she turned dramatically, as if expecting one of us to stop her. Neither of us moved. Her eyes darted between us, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw something. Fear, maybe? Or disbelief that her control over Nathan had slipped. Then she slammed the door and was gone. I hadn't realized I was trembling until Nathan wrapped his arms around me. "Hey, it's over. She's gone." I buried my face in his chest, tears finally breaking free. "She's not going to stop, Nathan. She's going to go after Caleb. She's going to dig up everything I tried to leave behind." He tipped my chin up, forcing me to meet his eyes. "Then we'll fight. Together. I don't care what she thinks she knows. Caleb is ours, and I'm not letting anyone take him away from you, from us." For the first time that night, I believed him. I felt his strength wrapping around me, not just physically, but in the way his voice steadied my heartbeat. We had faced Joanne's cruelty before, but tonight was different. Tonight he had chosen, and he chose us. I closed my eyes, whispering, "Thank you." Nathan kissed my forehead and held me tighter. "We're going to be okay, Madison. I promise." But deep down, I knew Joanne wasn't done. People like her didn't just walk away. And if she had already gone this far, what would stop her from going further? The house was quiet after Joanne left. But it wasn't the kind of quiet that soothes you. It was heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. Nathan hadn't moved from my side. His hand stayed firm on my shoulder, grounding me while my chest rose and fell in uneven bursts. "I'm sorry," I whispered, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Nathan frowned. "Why are you apologizing?" "Because she's right about one thing. Caleb isn't your blood." The confession caught in my throat like glass. "I should have told you from the beginning, but I was terrified. I thought you'd walk away like Blake did." Nathan turned me to face him fully, his expression calm but resolute. "Madison, listen to me. I don't care whose blood runs in his veins. That boy is my son. He always has been. He calls me Dad, and I will never let anyone take him from us. You hear me?" My eyes stung as I nodded. "But Joanne is done," he said sharply, surprising even himself with the conviction in his voice. "Tonight made me see things I should have seen years ago. She's not trying to help anyone. She's trying to control us, just like she's always controlled Blake. I'm done letting her have power over our lives." He stepped back and ran a hand through his hair, pacing once before stopping at the window. "Tomorrow, I'm calling the attorney who helped with our mortgage papers. We're going to start the adoption process. Caleb is legally going to be my son. No questions, no loopholes. If Joanne or Blake want to try something, let them. We'll be ready." I blinked at him. "Nathan, you'd really do that? You'd go through all of that just to—" "Not just to," he interrupted softly, coming back to me and holding my hands. "Because I love him. Because I love you. This is our family, Madison. I should have stood up for you sooner. But I'm standing up now. The weight I'd carried for years, the secret of Caleb's birth, the fear that it could one day rip my life apart, suddenly felt lighter. My knees gave out, and Nathan caught me as I leaned into him. I let the tears come, not from fear this time, but from relief. "You have no idea what this means to me," I murmured against his chest. He smiled faintly. "I think I do." We sat on the couch, his arm around me, the clock ticking softly in the background. For the first time since overhearing Joanne's words, I could breathe without feeling like my ribs were about to snap. Later that night, after Nathan fell asleep, I checked on Caleb in his little bed at my mom's house via the baby monitor we kept for overnight visits. He was sprawled out, one arm over his stuffed bear, the peaceful innocence of sleep softening his tiny features. "My son. Our son." I whispered to the screen. "No one's ever taken you away from me, ever." The storm Joanne had started wasn't over. I knew that. But tonight, Nathan had chosen his side, our side, and it felt like the first crack of sunlight after a long, bitter winter. For the first time, I believed we might really be okay. 2 days later, I heard a soft knock on our front door. It wasn't the sharp, impatient knock Joanne always used. This one was hesitant, almost apologetic. When I opened the door, Chloe stood there, clutching a small tin of cookies like a peace offering. "Hi, Madison," she said quietly. "Do you have a minute?" I hesitated. Chloe had always been polite, but distant, more of a guest in Joanne's world than an ally in mine. Still, something in her expression told me this wasn't a social visit. "Of course," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." She sat at our kitchen table, hands twisting in her lap. For a long moment, she didn't speak, just stared at the tin of cookies. Then she exhaled sharply. "I know about Joanne's plan about Caleb." My stomach clenched. "You'd know." Chloe nodded, her eyes glistening. "I overheard part of it last week. At first, I didn't understand, but after what happened the other night, Joanne called me, furious you'd kicked her out. I put the pieces together. She looked up, tears finally slipping free. Madison, I am so sorry. I had no idea she would go that far. I sank into the chair opposite her, stunned. You're not part of it. Her head shook fiercely. God, no. I would never take someone else's child. I can't have kids, and yeah, that's hard. But Caleb isn't mine, and he never should be. Joanne's obsession, it's not about what's best for him. It's about control. Something in my chest loosened. For years, I'd braced myself to see Chloe as an enemy simply because she was married to Blake, the man who had abandoned me. But sitting here now, I saw someone else entirely, a woman carrying her own pain, her own battle scars. I'm sorry too, I whispered, for assuming you wanted what Joanne wanted. Chloe gave a sad smile. I get it. I know what Blake did. He told me before we married. Well, part of it. He left out how cruel he'd been. I guess I wanted to believe people change, but lately, she trailed off, shaking her head. Let's just say my marriage isn't what I thought it would be. The silence stretched, not awkward, but heavy with truth. For the first time, I felt no anger toward her, only a quiet understanding. She reached across the table, resting her hand over mine. If Joanne tries anything, I'll stand with you. I'll tell the truth. Kayla belongs with you and Nathan. The kindness in her eyes almost undid me. Thank you, Chloe. That means more than you know. She smiled faintly and pushed the tin of cookies toward me. These are chocolate chip. Caleb likes them, right? I laughed softly, a sound I hadn't expected to hear from myself so soon. Yeah, he'll love them. When she left, the house felt warmer, somehow lighter. It hit me then that healing doesn't always come from winning battles. It sometimes comes from unexpected places, like two women who once stood on opposite sides, finding common ground. That night, I told Nathan about Chloe's visit. He listened quietly, then wrapped his arms around me. See, we're not alone in this. For the first time since overhearing Joanne's plan, I believed it. We had allies, we had truth, and most importantly, we had each other. A week later, Nathan suggested we take a drive out to the edge of town, to the little piece of land we'd been slowly turning into a small vineyard. It was quiet out there, just the sound of wind in the trees and the soft hum of bees. Caleb loved it, running through the rows of young vines like it was his personal playground. That day, we brought a small sapling with us. Nathan carried it on his shoulder, while Caleb proudly clutched a little plastic spade. We're planting this one for us, Nathan said, smiling as he knelt down beside me. A new start. Caleb dug with all the determination of a 5-year-old, dirt flying everywhere as he hummed a tune from one of his cartoons. I knelt next to him, gently scooping soil into the hole he'd made. Nathan placed the sapling in, steady and straight, and together we covered its roots. There, I said softly, brushing the dirt from my hands. Strong roots, right, Caleb? He nodded, eyes bright. Like our family. The simplicity of his words nearly undid me. After everything, the secrets, the fear, the betrayal, this little boy still saw nothing but love and safety when he looked at us. Nathan put an arm around my shoulders, pulling me close. That's exactly right, buddy. Strong roots. As we worked, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Chloe. Joanne won't be bothering you for a while. She's processing things. I told her I won't support any plan to take Caleb. Thought you should know. I read it twice, relief washing over me. Joanne hadn't apologized. People like her rarely did. But at least she'd been stopped, her grip on our lives broken. For the first time in years, I felt like I could exhale without waiting for the next blow to land. Later, we sat on the porch of the small cabin Nathan had been building by hand, sipping lemonade as Caleb drew pictures of the new tree in his sketchpad. Think it'll grow tall? He asked, holding up his drawing. Taller than you, Nathan said, ruffling his hair, and you're going to be pretty tall. I smiled, watching them together. This was what I had fought so hard for. Not perfection, Not luxury, just peace. Just the kind of love that didn't question its own worth. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Nathan took my hand. When all this started, I thought we might break, he admitted. But we didn't. We're stronger now. You, me, Caleb, we're solid. I leaned against him, the warmth of his shoulder grounding me. We are, I agreed. And no one's ever going to change that. The tree we planted swayed gently in the breeze, its fragile branches catching the light. It would take years to grow strong enough to bear fruit, but that was okay. So would we. That night, after Caleb had fallen asleep in the car on the way home, Nathan carried him to bed while I lingered on the porch, looking out at the dark sky. The stars over Eugene were bright, scattered like tiny lanterns, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel small underneath them. I felt grounded. I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From the girl who had fallen for Blake's charm and been left standing alone, holding a positive pregnancy test and a broken heart, to the woman who had chosen to keep her child, no matter the cost. For so long, I had carried shame like it was stitched into my skin. Shame for falling for the wrong man, for raising a child alone, for building walls around myself so high no one could climb them. But Nathan had climbed them. He hadn't just climbed them. He had taken my hand and helped me step over them, brick by brick, until one day I realized I wasn't trapped anymore. And Caleb, he had given me a reason to keep going even when I thought I had nothing left. He was my light when the world felt dark. Joanne's cruelty had cut deep, but in the end it revealed something I'd almost forgotten. Family isn't about DNA or the stories people tell behind closed doors, or even about who the world thinks you should be with. Family is about who stays when things get hard, who stands beside you when the storm comes. Nathan had chosen me and Caleb without hesitation. Chloe, unexpectedly, had chosen truth over blood loyalty. And even in his innocence, Caleb had chosen love. Unquestioning, unconditional love that didn't care about the past. I stepped back inside and watched Nathan tuck Caleb in, his hand resting gently on our son's back. Caleb murmured something in his sleep, his tiny fist gripping Nathan's shirt, like even in his dreams he needed to know we weren't going anywhere. When Nathan came back to the doorway, I whispered, "You saved us." He shook his head. "No, Madison. We saved each other." I smiled, tears pricking my eyes, and reached for his hand. The warmth of his fingers wrapping around mine told me everything I needed to know. We were safe, we were whole, and we were finally free. Standing there, I thought of the tree we'd planted earlier. It would grow, slow and steady, its roots deepening over the years. One day, Caleb would sit under its shade, maybe with kids of his own, and know that it had all started with love and a choice to protect what mattered most. If there's one thing life has taught me, it's this. Sometimes the family you fight hardest to keep isn't the one you're born into, but the one you choose, day after day. And sometimes the deepest healing doesn't come from winning a battle, but from knowing you're no longer fighting alone. I kissed Nathan softly, feeling the quiet hum of our home around us, and whispered to myself, "We're home now, all of us."